ever just wished you could step back in time, not to see the big, flashy historical events, but to really get a feel for what it was like to live a normal life in a world that's so different from ours? Well, today we're going to do just that. We are stepping into the shoes of one 13-year-old girl to see how a 19th century matriarch was made. So, let's meet her. Hattie Louisa Hildreth. This single image, painted with words, is our doorway into her world. You can just picture her, right? Standing on the threshold of a new home, a new town, and on the very edge of a whole new life. And where are we? Leominster, Massachusetts. The year is 1871. The world is changing, fast. And for Hattie, pretty much everything she knows is about to be redefined. You know, this wasn't just about moving houses for the Hildreth family. For Hattie, this was a massive turning point. It was like a line was being drawn in the sand between the girl she was and the woman everyone expected her to become. I mean, think about being 13. It's a tough age for anyone, right? But for Hattie, it was a time of just immense pressure. She was leaving childhood behind and was now being actively trained for her future role as a wife, a mother, and the manager of a household. Every single day brought a whole new set of responsibilities and expectations. And what a world to step into. Leominster was not the quiet town she was used to. Oh no, this was a place humming with energy. The soundtrack of daily life wasn't birdsong, it was the whistle of factories and the constant clatter of machines. It was a world of ambition and really, really hard work, and Hattie was plopped right down in the middle of it all. So while Hattie did go to a formal school, her most important and probably most demanding education happened right inside the walls of her own home. This was her real classroom, and believe me, the lessons never stopped. Now, this is so interesting because it shows the two completely different worlds Hattie had to navigate under one roof. First, you have the kitchen. This was the engine room, a place of constant labor, all centered around a super temperamental wood stove. This is where real life happened. But then you have the parlor. Oh, that was the family's public face. It was kept perfectly clean, totally off limits for daily life, and reserved only for visitors. It was a symbol of their social standing. So Hattie learned very early on about the difference between private work and public presentation. And this quote just says it all. Her mother wasn't just teaching her a list of chores. She was teaching her a whole system. How to plan, how to be resourceful, how to create order out of what could easily be chaos. These were lessons in management, in economics, even in hospitality. She was learning how to run the whole show. So what did this curriculum actually involve? Let's be really clear here. The term housework doesn't even begin to cover the sheer physical labor that was required to run a home back in 1871. Okay, just take laundry day. This wasn't about pushing a button. It was an all-day, back-breaking ordeal. Imagine hauling bucket after heavy bucket of water from a well, just to get started. Then hours of scrubbing clothes on a washboard, followed by wringing out every single heavy, wet garment by hand. Your hands would be raw. And in the winter, the entire house would be draped in damp clothes. It was absolutely grueling. And then there was needlework. This wasn't some quaint little hobby. This was a critical survival skill. It ranged from the purely practical, like darning socks and patching trousers to make every piece of clothing last as long as possible, to the more refined skills, like embroidery or tatting lace. These skills were not only essential for the family's budget, but they were also the mark of a well-brought-up young woman, building up items for her hope chest in preparation for marriage. Wow, this chart really just puts it all into perspective, doesn't it? Look at that breakdown. The vast majority of Hattie's waking hours, a whopping 60%, were consumed by household labor. School, friends, any kind of fun, that all had to be squeezed into the margins of a day already overflowing with work. Her entire life was defined by these responsibilities. But Hattie's world wasn't just confined to the home. So let's explore the very structured, very rule-bound social world she had to navigate every time she walked out a front door. Her formal education was incredibly focused. It wasn't about broad intellectual exploration for its own sake. Nope. It was all about practical application for her future role. Reading was meant to instill morals. Good penmanship was for writing proper letters. Arithmetic, that was for managing a household budget. And deportment, which was basically how to behave like a proper lady, was maybe the most important subject of all.
And that education went way, way beyond the classroom. Hattie was constantly learning this complex set of unwritten social rules: how to speak, how to move, who she was allowed to talk to, and how to talk to them. Every single interaction was a test of her upbringing and a direct reflection on her family's reputation.
So, where could a girl like Hattie actually build a social life? Well, this chart breaks it down. Church was the absolute center of the social universe. It was respectable, it was supervised, and it's where you met other families. School was key for friendships with kids her own age, and the neighborhood was for more casual, task-oriented chats. Her social world was carefully structured and very, very closely monitored. So, when you put all these pieces together, the move, the household classroom, the grueling work, the focused education, the strict social rules, what do you get? You see the forging of a future matriarch. This timeline connects the dots for us perfectly. The 13-year-old apprentice of 1871 is on a direct path. Everything she's learning, every skill she's mastering, is preparing her for the moment she'll be considered of marriageable age. And that, in turn, is preparing her for her ultimate role, to become the capable, respected head of her very own household. So here's the bottom line. Nothing in Hattie's young life was random. It was an intensive, hands-on apprenticeship for her future. The difficulty, the labor, the endless rules, it all had a purpose. It was building the competence and the character she would need to thrive as an adult. And this brings us right back to where we started. In that doorway, with the sun on her red hair, Hattie wasn't just a girl in a new town. She was in the process of becoming herself, forged by the demands and the values of her time. It really makes you think, doesn't it? Hattie's training was so explicit, so all-encompassing. And while our lives are obviously so different, we all carry lessons from our younger years. So the question I want to leave you with is this. What skills, whether they were taught to you or you discovered them on your own, have shaped the person you are right now?